short video on what to do in Libya. So it appears really as if Libyans are done with Gaddafi, and that's the most important factor. How we in the West feel about Gaddafi has no bearing, I think, on whether we should intervene in the current conflict or not. But since the majority of the Libyan people do seem to want to get rid of him, I think that the moral action is to intervene on their behalf to rid them of Gaddafi, and then to allow them to figure out the next step for themselves. Of course, the question is how to intervene. And I think most people have some trepidation in suggesting that ground forces should just roll in and obliterate Libyan forces. Because, well, first of all, the way the wars are conducted in this case, usually by players such as the US, are very, well, there's not very much regard for civilian life. So the collateral damage is, and I shouldn't say collateral damage, I just say the killing of civilians is unacceptably common. So I don't think, unless someone puts forward a really solid proposal on how to intervene militarily in a ground war, that the UN should be sending in any troops, at least not at this stage. Although that is something I think that should be considered, especially if it's done under direction of, say, the Arab League or something to that nature. But I think there's a step that can be taken right away, and I think that makes perfect sense, and that's to establish a no-fly zone over Libya. Only the government forces have fighter planes. Every pilot of a fighter plane is, in fact, a soldier and not a civilian. And every pilot of a fighter plane has the opportunity to do as pilots in the Libyan Air Force have done, which is to eject from their planes and cease fighting the Libyan people. So I think what should be done is the international community should agree as quickly as possible to make sure that all the Libyan Air Force stays grounded, and that Libyan protesters and Libyan rebels, or freedom fighters, however you want to term them, as well as Libyan civilians, are safe from that form of attack, because I think that can be done with no civilian casualties, no risk to civilians, and no cost to the civilian people. So I think that is really something that the international community could do very quickly if anyone really cared about the interests of the Libyan people. But I don't think that it's going to happen, because it's going to be costly, and it's going to confer additional responsibility onto the international community, which the largest members just don't want to take at the moment. And when it comes to a case of genuine human need, it's quite rare that the international community does anything sensible. So I'm not holding out great hopes, but it would be a good time for the international community to step in and show that, in fact, they're willing to back up all their talk of supporting freedom with action. And whilst I'm generally very much leaning on the side of pacifism, and whilst I am very much against the imperial ambitions of the big nations in the UN, I think as long as parameters are maintained to ensure that there are no civilian casualties, and that there's no pressure put on a future Libyan state to implement a certain system against the will of the Libyan people, I think there's really no conflict with my ideas on how the world should run.